Hi, Robbie Burns here. In the following screencast, I am going to outline my workflow for creating a virtual ensemble video. There are about 7 or 8 steps that I cover in this video. There are definitely a lot of things I do not cover in this video, and I wanted to make sure that I outlined what exactly I'm going to discuss up front so you know what to expect. First, we're going to talk about making a play-along track for your students to record along to. And then I'm going to talk about how to change the tempo of that track so that you can slow it down or speed it up for practicing purposes. Then I'm going to talk about sharing that track with students and then gathering back their submissions. Once you have those submissions, I'm going to talk about how you can align them in Final Cut Pro, how I export the audio for more advanced editing in Logic Pro, and then how I export it right back again to Final Cut Pro where I finish editing the project. If you like the tips in this video, learning about new apps to become productive in the music classroom, or if you want to learn more about using technology to enhance your music teaching, make sure you check out my podcast, Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find it at musicedtechtalk.com. I also blog about this stuff at robbieburns.com. You can buy my book, Digital Organization Tips for Music Teachers, from Oxford University Press or Amazon. Hey there, Robbie Burns here. I wanted to talk a little bit about my process for editing a virtual band video. There are certainly more comprehensive how-tos out there. My workflow just takes advantage of a couple of little Mac apps and utilities that sped things up for me a little bit. So I thought it was worth making a quick video. This is just kind of like a top-level, broad strokes overview of what I'm doing. So usually I start by assigning a piece of concert music to my students that they're going to all play and then submit individual separate videos of themselves performing that music. So what I have to do is create some sort of consistent tempo for them, and I like the idea that they're modeling themselves after professionals and feeling themselves blend into something so that some of those rehearsal skills are still to some degree being reinforced. So what I do is I actually make them a play-along track that is built from a professional recording. And obviously it's problematic that a lot of these recordings just immediately start. So I have to add some kind of count off for them. So what typically I do is I start in Logic Pro by Apple, but you could use any audio editing tool. You could use GarageBand, you could use Audacity. And then what I do is I find the audio file of the play-along track and I bring that in as an audio file. Now, then what I do is I create another audio track for my voice, and then I record myself counting off 2 measures in that tempo. 1 and 2 and 1, 2, ready, go. Now notice I recorded on the same track that my play-along track is. That's fine, I'll just move it down here. And then you just kind of tweak it a little bit. 2 and 1, 2, ready, go. That was pretty close. Let's just say that it wasn't. 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, so obviously that's a little too early. So one of the little tricks that works really well for me during this process, but also in the audio editing part, once I've got all the student performances stacked, is to highlight light blue here, the region that I want to do, and to make really minute adjustments to the timing. You can actually hold the Option key in Logic and then hit the right and the left arrows, which it's happening very, very small, to a very small degree, so you probably can't see it very well. But I am adjusting this track by the smallest possible amount that it will move. And then what I'll usually do is just drag up here the cycle tool so that I can just continue to keep adjusting this same spot until it's just right. And 1, 2, ready, go. All right, so I just keep working with that. And 1, 2, ready, go. And 1, 2, ready, go. Ready, go. And 1, 2, ready, go. You can see I'm getting it kind of where I want it to be so that it's got great timing. Then what I'll often do is You know, you could like add, I like to have a metronome in the opening count off. It just kind of gives the students something a little bit more grounded. My voice is not as percussive as a metronome, so you could obviously add another track here. I use a metronome app called Dr. Betotte for the Mac that I really like, and I just tap tempo using the return key. I like that, that's pretty assertive. Now how do I turn that into an audio file? Well, I've got an app called Audio Hijack, and this app will actually record the audio of another application. So I'm going to open a session here, and what I'm going to do is record the application audio of the Dr. Betotte app. So once I hit the record button, okay, and then what I can do with that is it'll actually take me directly to the recording of that right here, and then I can take myself straight to where that file is in the Finder, or I can actually export it into a Logic file or my music library. Let's find it in the Finder, and then I'm going to drag it in. There it is. Okay, let's take it and then drag it in as an audio file. 1 and 2 and 1. Okay, so I got to do the same game I did before, where I kind of line these two things up. Fortunately, I can see the spike in the metronome and try to get that lined up with my voice. 1 and 2, and you get the idea. All right, so that's usually how I do my play along track. When it's all set, what I like to do is bounce the recording to a particular place on my hard drive, usually the desktop. And then there it is. Now, I like to take this a step further. I don't like my students to necessarily jump straight in to playing it at full speed. I like to give them some slowed down versions of it at first that help them to, you know, more gradually increase and develop their technique, while in the earlier stages focusing more on tone production, intonation, and balance. So I'm gonna go back to my Finder here. Here's my play along track. And there's a great app called Transcribe that I like to use on the Mac. A great alternative for this is Anytune. I actually like Anytune a little bit more these days, but Transcribe is a little more cost efficient. The other benefit of Anytune is that you can also find it on the iPhone and the iPad as well if you want to do this process. By the way, this whole process can be done on an iPad. All right, so I'm going to drag my play along track into here. 1 and 2 and 1. Okay, so let's say that I want to slow that down. I just drag it. 1 and 2 and 1, 2, ready, go. And you can hear that the pitch of the first chord is the same. It doesn't actually change the pitch when you increase or decrease the speed. So Transcribe will let me export that sound file. This is 83% of the speed, so I'm going to call it 83% speed, and also save that to the desktop. So this is my resulting file. What I do with this next is I right-click it, and then I move it to my Dropbox account, where I then right-click it again, and I can actually just copy to my clipboard the link, and then when I'm actually creating the assignment, I just hit Command V, and then it just provides the link directly to that file right in the body of my assignment, and it's actually being hosted on Dropbox, not actually in the learning management system that I use. I find that I use Canvas for my school, and I find that their lots of learning management software is just real fiddly with the uploading of documents. So I like to mine in Dropbox, and that's how I get it in my students' hands. Next up, let's talk a little bit about what I do with all of the return videos and how I instruct my students to set that up. So I want to unpack this process a little bit more. The way that I handled this was I personally would take the recording and slow it down to 60, 70, 80, and 90%, and in some cases 110 and 120%, depending on the situation. And then what I would do is I would have the students all, the first week that we worked on this project, they would record along to the 70% speed recording. And then what I would do is, and this actually helped me to practice the process so that I got many, many practice attempts to learn the software before the final. I would edit kind of haphazardly all of those videos together, and I wouldn't really attempt to line up the videos of them. Or even be too minute about the editing. I would just simply drag them all together and into something that was watchable. And then what we would do is in our following Google Meet or video chat class check-in, I would play that video for them, and then we would listen to it, and I would coach them through some of the things that needed to improve for the next time. So usually that would be things like, hey, some of you didn't record video, just audio only. Or some of you recorded in the wrong orientation of video. Some of you submitted, I think you attempted to submit, but it was to the wrong speed, or you didn't use a play-along track, or you didn't wear headphones so I could hear my play-along track in the background. This provided a lot of opportunity to work through things. And then the next week I would do 80%, and then 90%. And then we would kind of work through this week by week until we got to a point where all of the procedural parts of the project and the video submissions were correct. And then in the meantime, they've been gradually increasing their ability to play it faster and faster while still maintaining a good concept of tone and accuracy and blend and all of those things. One or two times I did actually have them adjudicate our video by creating a Jamboard, which is like a Google-owned web-based whiteboard program. It's kind of like a Google Doc, but it's like a multi-page whiteboard. And what I did was I created a sticky note on each page of the whiteboard. One page was tone, one was intonation, one was rhythm, and I would have them add little stickies to each one of those pages, giving feedback and comments on that element of our recording. And then they could all see each other's feedback on the Jamboard.
All right, so what happens next is my students have submitted their video and audio recordings on the learning management system that we use in my district, which is Canvas. You might use Blackboard or Google Classroom. It doesn't matter. I have a lot of video now. Now, fortunately for me on Canvas, I'm not going to demonstrate this because it's something that's different for everyone, but I can click a button that will just download all of the work submissions for a particular assignment in Canvas. So that's exactly what I've done. And I've put them all in a folder on my desktop called Submissions. And now what I'm going to do is take every single one of these videos and import them into Final Cut Pro, where I'm going to align them all together. But before I do that, I think it's worth mentioning that some of the videos inevitably have weird quirks, like they just have all black video and no audio or something weird, or like just a really, or they won't even open on my computer. So the way that I address this is with a Mac app called Permute. It's really excellent. It is a fuss-free utility that allows you to just simply drag a file into it, an audio or a video file, and then you can do like a bunch of batch files with it. So like I guess I could just do the same one twice, and then you can click here to convert a bunch at once, or you can click on an individual file to convert one at a time. And notice you just simply select which audio or video format you want. So you could turn a video into an audio file. Or if you have a video file that for some reason will play when you play it in QuickTime or in the Finder, but it will not play when you import it into Final Cut Pro, I find that turning it into this particular file format, the HEVC file, typically works in Final Cut. And then I can run that on a bunch of problematic videos that are giving me trouble. And then it's really simple. Once it's done, it just puts them right in the downloads folder where I can drag and drop them straight into Final Cut. So eventually I'm ready to import these into Final Cut. And I do this by first creating a new event. And events and projects are two of the different paradigms you work with in Final Cut. You can of course do this in Adobe Premiere or some sort of other tool. I work the fastest in Final Cut, and as of this recording, they are offering a 90-day free trial for all educators. Final Cut and Logic, which have both been demonstrated in this video, you can, with an educator discount, get them both, including some of Apple's other professional creative apps, for a total of $200. Now, if you don't know this, Logic Pro itself is $200 for the average customer. So you get
Final Cut, which is $300, Logic, which is $200, and then you get Motion, Compressor, and Mainstage, which are apps that relate to stuff that you can do in Logic and in Final Cut. It's a total of like numerous hundreds of dollars, like at least $700 or so dollars, and you get it all for $200 as a teacher. So if you're thinking of going this path, this is really good value for your money. You definitely need to be on a Mac, obviously, but since so many people in education come from GarageBand and iMovie, I find that the user interface of these two apps are have the lowest barrier to entry for people who are familiar with that kind of education software. So we're going to create a new event, and an event is it's just like a collection of audio and video files. So this is week 6 submissions, and I'm going to call it 2. I actually I'm like doing this project for real so that I can show you the final video, or at least a little tiny piece of it. So I'm going to call this something different. And then notice there's an option to import media. Now, like most Apple software, I can click this button and then it'll show me a window that has access to my hard drive, or I can just drag it in. Now, you have 2 ways you can import information. You can leave the files where they are, and Final Cut will reference them, or you can copy them into the Final Cut library. And I'm mentioning this because no matter what video editing software you use, this will be a consideration that you need to deal with. Copying them to the library will duplicate them, which means I'll have tons of extra. I'll have basically double the amount of video taking up my hard drive. I'll have the stuff that's in my folder where I downloaded things from Canvas, and then I will have yet another copy of each file living in Final Cut. So I tend to not do that, but here's something you want to be real careful of. I've been using leave files in place for the majority of my video projects, and because sometimes I leave these folders on the desktop, I actually do this thing with my Mac where I sync the desktop to iCloud, which is great because then I can hop on my iPad and anything sitting on my desktop is available to me right on my iPad and my iPhone to work on. But Apple sometimes, iCloud will it'll try to smartly figure out if you want to save some space on your hard drive, and it'll start bouncing files up to the cloud. So I've had it happen before where since audio and video files are very big, I'll have a bunch of video in my project that's all blanked out, and I'll go to look in that folder of files, and I'll notice that iCloud has taken some of them off of my hard drive and put them in the cloud. I have to re-download them, which is a real pain. And you can't customize which things permanently live on your hard drive and which things are smartly beamed to the cloud like you can with Dropbox. So kind of an issue. I don't do much with any of this other stuff. So, and I'm not going to actually import any of this. I'm just going to drag things one by one because I've already done this particular project in another place. So I'm going to create now a new project, and a new project is going to be actually the name of what the video is. So this is virtual band piece. And I tend to go with these specs. I'm not going to get into this. This is really just going to be dependent on what kind of video proportions and styles your students have sent to you. I'm going to go ahead and start it, and then what I'm going to do is start dragging things in. So let's go ahead and drag. Oh, you know what is important to mention here? I like to take my play along track and drag that in first so that I can easily align everything up to that. It's really challenging to try to line the students up to each other, especially because I find that the first couple of notes, they're trying to find their footing, so they're a little bit out of sync with each other. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drag in a video here. And what I'm going to do here is you kind of want to take the opening spike of the recording, and then you want to line that up with the opening spike of the student video. So notice that the opening note right here, here's a spike, and then here's the opening spike of the actual piece. So basically what I'm doing is I am just lining up a bunch of opening spikes. So I'm going to go ahead and take my next performance. I'm going to drag them in. They have not included video. They've covered their camera. So I'll eventually just eliminate that video from the project. But I'm going to trim them a little bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line up the initial spike. Now I can mute and silence certain people to help myself, figure out where exactly certain problems are in the project. So eventually what you end up with is a bunch of video and audio files stacked in a row, lined up by spike. And I'm going to go ahead and play this for you. You can see that I've done a little bit of work, kind of like, and I haven't really gone all the way yet, but I started to sort of like put the pictures of the video in a square like grid fashion. It's not very clean or neat yet. How you do that depends on which video editor you use, so I'm not even going to address that in this video. But we can go ahead and see that things are coming together. So it's important to note that there are going to be a lot of audio issues. So the thing that I need to do next is I need to edit those audio issues, and I am way more comfortable in Logic than I am in Final Cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually export something called an XML file, and we're going to export this file to the desktop, and then from the desktop we're going to open it in Logic Pro. Now once you're in Logic, you can do all sorts of things. You're going to, first of all, you have to go in and import the Final Cut Pro XML. There's a couple of options for importing an XML file. You want to choose specifically the Final Cut Pro XML file, and then it's going to take all the different audio tracks from your video and it's going to align them in a row. Now it's not going to look this pretty. It's actually going to look like this, and then you're going to click this button and they're going to be all out of order. There aren't going to be any names. There aren't going to be any pictures of instruments. I added all of that. So what you can do is, I like to go section by section, and I like to right click and choose which instrument appears. I like to put the first names of all my students in there. I also like to group the different instruments together, and I do this by selecting multiple tracks at once and then selecting to create a group. Now, if we go to my group settings, we can see that I've already grouped some together so that my flutes can all be adjusted at the same time once I get them adjusted relative to one another. So that can be useful. Now, there's a handful of other things that I really do like to do. I'm going to go ahead and dig right in here a little bit. I'm going to go into the piccolo players part here, and you can see that I have turned on flex pitch. And what flex pitch allows me to do is it actually maps every single note of the piccolo performance to a piano roll, and I can actually adjust the pitch of these. So if I, for example, so let's just say that, for example, this note was a wrong note, I can literally move a note, or all of the notes in this case. I didn't realize all of them were selected there. Now you can see that these notes are all higher than they were before. Let's actually try that on just one note here. So I'm going to, instead of, so I can change the note. I can also adjust the pitch. So if a particular note is a little sharp or flat, I can drag the pitch sharp or flat. I can also take the note and I can actually move its rhythm slightly earlier or later, which is great for fixing rhythmic alignment issues. So inevitably, when you have young students do this kind of thing, they depend on the strength of playing with others because that's what they're used to. Not to mention the fact that there's all sorts of issues that can occur when you're recording alone in your home. For example, maybe there's like a weird fan noise that you can fix. Like sometimes I'll go in and you can actually fix some kinds of noise issues using software plugins. So for example, here I have some isotope plugins, like a spectral denoise that's actually able to learn a noise pattern that you play for it on a track, and then it's able to eliminate the noise out of that track. So if someone has a really noisy ceiling fan, I will apply this plugin to that track to try to get that to go away. So that's the general workflow in Logic. So I make sure that everything is rhythmically aligned. You can fix wrong notes if you want to. How much you want to do that, how much you want that to be true to the student's performance is up to you. I think a little bit of touching up is fair, given that this is a really different kind of experience for students, and they are not really listening and hearing each other in the same way. So I do adjust a little bit of things. The rhythm is more of the glaring issue that they struggle with in recording these along to these play-along tracks. So I just want to jump in here real quick and say that I do not condone auto-tuning all of the issues out of your ensemble when you make your video. I thought I should just state that for the record so that I don't get lots of comments on this page about it. The main reason why I showed those features was sort of to display the extent to which you can edit things in Logic Pro. But I do just want to add that there are rare situations where I think it is fair to do some small things. For example, one of my flute players, her instrument was just really sharp. I don't know if something happened in the translation of that audio file over submitting it, or if she just didn't adjust her head joint. That's the kind of thing that in a band rehearsal or before a concert, I would have just told her, pull out your head joint, and we would have fixed it. And it's not something that really there was a fast enough feedback loop for me to address in the making of these videos. So I just dragged her flute tone, a couple cents in the direction it needed to go. So I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt in some cases. If there are drift issues rhythmically, I had a lot of cases where one of the part of the track would be just ever so slightly faster or slower than the rest of my tracks, and I would have to periodically make some cuts and shift forward some rhythms to fix some of those issues. So anyway, I'm just trying to say, I personally believe that the final product should represent your ensemble. Just had to get that off my chest. So eventually you're going to end up with something that sounds like an improvement over what you had in Final Cut. And once you feel like you have that improvement, you can go to the File menu and you're going to actually export this again. You're going to export this as an XML. This time there's a specific kind of XML file that you need to export, which is for Final Cut Pro. And once you export that, you're going to go back into Final Cut Pro. And then you're going to go into a particular project. So I'm going to go into a project that I'm going to import that into. And then you do exactly that. You import the XML project, and then what Final Cut will do is it will actually put it all as one giant audio block right here. You have to just drag and drop it into your project. And as you can see down here, this is my final audio file from the XML import that I edited in Logic. So the ending result is you get this really nicely edited audio file, which remains in sync with all the video files that you had established before, because it's using the same timeline and linking it all together in a really nice way. From there, I just simply export the video once I'm done with it. I'm going to add some titles and some transitions just to make the beginning and the end of this video look clean, and I'm going to make sure that I get the videos lined up better so that it doesn't look like a bunch of different lights in a house turning on and off at different times. But other than that, that's the general flow of how I get my files from one place to the next. I hope this was helpful.
If you like the tips in this video, learning about new apps to become productive in the music classroom, or if you want to learn more about using technology to enhance your music teaching, make sure you check out my podcast, Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find it at musicedtechtalk.com. I also blog about this stuff at robbieburns.com. You can buy my book, Digital Organization Tips for Music Teachers, from Oxford University Press or Amazon.